how to get a good sound from the heel or frog of the bow. The heel or the frog of the bow is the bottom 10 centimeters of the bow. Both terms mean the same thing. When we play at the bottom of the bow, often if you are new to the violin, or you could have been playing for many years and avoiding using the bottom end of the bow because you are always getting a sound like this. So when we change direction at the tip, that doesn't happen. Because the tip is very light. However, at the heel, the entire weight of the bow is pressing on the string. So if we are just to hold the bow like this, just relying on the weight of the bow, then we're not going to get a good sound there. So how can we adapt our bow hold and our technique in order to create a good sound at the bottom end of the bow? So the trick is we have to take the weight out of the bow when we're moving towards the heel. And to do that, we use our lovely springy fingers. Now, if you haven't already watched my first video on bow hold lesson 1, and you're not entirely sure what I mean by springy fingers, then go ahead and watch that. Essentially, the bow hold should never be rigid. Your hands should never be tense. It should be relaxed, and your fingers should be flexible. And the reason for this is so that we can adapt our Sorry, I got distracted by playing at the heel then, it was quite fun. Basically, you need to take the weight of the bow into the fingers, and the way that we do that is essentially by very, very slowly, as we're moving from the tip to the heel, try to feel the weight of the bow transferring into the little finger. So I want you to have the little finger on top of the bow, bent like this. If you don't have it bent, if it's straight, this isn't going to work, because a straight finger has locked joints, and if your joints are locked, then basically you're not going to be able to absorb the shock of the bow hitting the string, because the joints can't absorb that shock. If they're unlocked, then they can. Again, the fingers act like a suspension system in a car, which is made up of springs. So you need to have your fingers to be springy, okay? If they are rigid, then you're going to have a problem, and you need to work on relaxing the right hand. I do have some videos on hand stretches for musicians and things that you can do to improve that. However, the best way is just be conscious. Every time that you pick up your bow, if you just check in maybe every 5 minutes or so and say, is my hand relaxed? Just check. And if it isn't, then relax the tension in the fingers, and you'll find that you automatically get a smoother sound. Okay, so going back to playing at the heel. Now, as you move from the tip to the heel of the bow, I want you to really feel the weight of the bow in this little finger. Now check, is your thumb bent? Your thumb should be bent and on its side. Again, if you're not sure about how to hold the bow, please go back and watch my bow hold video. I don't want to repeat that now. I just want you to have bent fingers that are flexible, okay? Now, I want you to move from the tip to the heel. Imagine your little finger is glued to the top of the bow, okay? Just imagine that. And why I'm saying that is because we don't want you to lift it off or to have it slip off like that. It needs to be strong in its contact point with the top of the bow, and the top of the bow being the flattest, the flat top bit. I don't know if your bow's hexagonal or octagonal or round, but there should be a flat top bit there, okay? Okay, so we're going to try that now. Very, very slowly. Open D. Moving from the tip to the heel, I want you to feel how the weight of the bow transfers into this little finger here as you move up, okay, towards the heel. Okay, so feel it. You should feel it more and more. As you move to the heel, bend your fingers. By the time you get to the heel, you should have your fingers bent like that, and you should feel the whole weight of the bow in the little finger. Now, if you press the bow down with the little finger, it lifts up in the air, okay? So you can take the weight of the bow in the finger very easily. Okay, so now I want you to place the bow at the heel. And again, I want you to be very conscious of what is going on in that little finger as you move towards the tip. So this time you should feel the weight transference leaving the little finger the closer you get to the tip. Okay, so again, starting, make sure your elbow's nice and high. You shouldn't play with a bent wrist like that. You should play with your wrist more or less flat when you're starting at the heel, okay? All right, here we go. Grab your violin, let's go. Okay, so now you should feel almost no weight in the little finger, and the little finger here, because I'm at the tip, I use my little finger to extend so that I can reach the tip. Actually, I don't need to do this because my arms are very long, but if you have shorter arms, then by straightening that little finger out, you can normally reach the tip more easily. I know some students struggle to reach the tip of the bow. Now, make sure that little finger is straight but not locked, basically. That's all I want to point out. If you lock it, then when you move back up towards the heel, it's going to stay locked. So let me show you what that looks like. This is a locked joint. A locked joint. Ah, and it's very painful now I'm at the heel. Oh my God, that's painful. Why? Because I can't take the weight of the bow in the finger beyond the first little group of muscles because I've locked the joints. And if I unlock the joint, I can use my muscles in my arm and my wrist, okay? So imagine locking a joint a bit like having a key towards using more muscles. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a biologist, I'm not a doctor, I don't understand the terminology, but this is just how I think about it, okay? Now, you'll notice when you start at the heel, you'll get that scratching sound at the beginning. That's because the bow here is most heavy. What can we do to prevent that? Now, when we are changing direction at the bottom end of the bow, at the heel, we need to use our thumb to help us lift the bow off the string for a very, very, very brief moment as you are turning from one direction to the other. Okay, so imagine an aeroplane landing, okay, and how an aeroplane lands when it lands very well is softly, right? So we basically want to imagine that when we change direction at the heel, we're like lifting our aeroplane off the runway and then putting it back on again. In order to basically take the weight out of the bow, we don't lift it off completely, we just take the weight out of the bow enough that we don't get a scratching sound when we're at the heel. To do that, again, if you haven't watched my first video on the bow hold and you're not entirely sure about the mechanics of the thumb in the bow hold, then please go back and watch it. The thumb should be bent and on its side, okay? And if it's bent, you can tuck it in like that and bend and straighten it, okay? So as we're using the bow, the thumb will bend and straighten just like I talked about the pinky. The thumb and the pinky are the most important little digits when it comes to bow hold, okay? And also this guy, this little index one here, this is going to help us as well, okay? So these guys, they don't do anything in this really, they just chill, okay? So we're going to lift the bow off very quickly like this when we change direction. It's such a small movement that it's barely noticeable, but I'm going to teach you how to do it. So, okay, in order to start this process off, we need to build up the strength in the fingers and flexibility, okay? So this exercise is the key. Let me just put my violin down and we'll look at it. Okay, I call this frog exercise because it's basically training the fingers in order to be able to play at the frog. So we are bending and straightening our fingers whilst keeping the contact point, so that's the point on the bow that you touch the bow, as firm as possible. And what I mean by that is we must not roll the bow around in our fingers. Contact points, so For the little finger, it's the tip of the finger. These guys, it's this paddy part. For this, you've got the bow hooked inside the index finger, and on the thumb, it's the point where the nail bed starts. The thumb and the little finger must not roll the bow. And by roll the bow, I mean like this. Okay, this is not what we're trying to achieve in this exercise. So if you notice your bow doing that, then you're not doing it right, okay? So, pick up your bow, get the bow hold in place, check if your thumb's bent. If it is, then we're good to go. Now, I want you to place a loop around the tip of the bow, or I'm going to do it a bit lower here so that you can see, because the bow's too long to have the entire length in the video. But you can place yours around the tip if you want. Try not to touch the hair when you're doing this. The only reason that we hold the bow here is to stop it from falling and give us security whilst we're building up the strength to do this exercise. So the goal of the exercise is to move the bow up and down like this. Okay? If you're doing that, then you're successful. Okay. All right, so how do I do that? I'm going to show you it from all different angles. I keep my contact points firm, okay? Contact points are firm, and then I bend and straighten the fingers. So for me, I put my attention in the contact points between the thumb and the violin and the little finger, sorry, and the bow, and the little finger and the bow. I put my attention there. I imagine my little finger is glued to the bow, and I'm trying to use the little finger to move the bow up and down, okay? And then the thumb should bend and follow. So put your mind here. And then I want you to imagine you're tucking the bow up and down as you bend and straighten the little finger. But again, it has to be really strong. So if your finger isn't able to stay on, then you need to go back to my bow hold lesson 1 video. I'm going to put the link below, and try the exercise, the pivot exercise that I teach in that, which strengthens the muscles in the little finger. Again, there's exercise in there as well, which helps if your finger is collapsing like that all of the time. You should always have your fingers unlocked, okay? So this is me doing it from the side. All right, so if we're doing this correctly, we should be able to get a little sound out of the violin if it's on the violin. We'll get to that later. So I'm going to show you again from all angles what I'm doing. So I'm imagining my mind focuses here, and the other fingers are going to follow. So if I just focus on one finger, it's much easier. I bend the little finger, the whole bow moves up in the air, and then I straighten out the little finger without locking it, and the whole bow moves down. And I want to repeat that. Up and down, up and down, up and down, until that feels natural, okay, and easy. If you are struggling with this exercise, I know a lot of people do at first, you can always contact me and book a lesson on theviolincoach@gmail.com. Contact details are in the description. Okay, so what's the next step? Once you can do that, I want you to place the violin. Again, this might take you a few weeks of work to get to the point where you can do this. Place your bow on the violin, and then we can maybe put it in the middle or at the point. It doesn't need to be at the heel at this moment. I want you to do the same thing with the bow on the string, and try to get, maybe you might play 1 to 3 centimeters of the bow, only using the fingers. So please note, here I am not moving from the elbow. Just my fingers. I'm also not using my wrist, just my fingers. Again, you can repeat this exercise until you get to the point that it feels very natural and easy for you to do this. So this is the movement that we need to master in order to be able to play at the heel. So once you've mastered the movement on the violin, then I want to try to explain how we put that in action when changing direction at the heel, okay? So we're going to have a very quick tuck movement like that. It's very quick as we change direction. And rather than like that, we're going digga, digga, but it's very small as well, because we only need to lift the bow enough to take it off the string, just enough that the weight isn't heavy enough to cause that sound. So maybe step one here would be to repeat the last exercise, but at the heel. That's how you can build up the strength to do the bow direction change at the heel. Okay, so you can start at the tip, then move to the middle, and then move to the heel. Okay, so now I'm going to show you in real time. Hopefully you can see what it's like when I change direction at the heel. It's a very quick tucking movement, okay? Very quick tucking movement. It's pretty difficult to explain what I mean by tuck, but it's like a very quick lift as you change direction. And to be honest with you, you can't really practice this slowly either. I suggest you start at the tip, approach the heel at a high speed, and then just as you're changing direction, just go back up, okay? You can hear a little gap when I change direction at the heel. Now you can minimize that gap by moving the fingers less, basically. If I move them too much, then the string lifts completely off the string, and you hear the bow lifts completely off the string, and then you hear a gap. So I'm going to try and do this a bit closer for you. Let's try again. Okay, I'm not going to start at the tip because I don't have space. I'm going to start in the middle. So I approach the heel very quickly, and I tuck as I change direction. Show you from this side. It's very hot here. Okay, so hopefully that's given you enough that you can understand at least the mechanics of how to change direction at the bottom of the bow. I'd be interested to hear whether this advice works for you, or whether you still have questions, and maybe I can address those questions. Please leave them in the comments. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. I am endeavoring to post a video every day at the moment, so I will be posting technical content as daily, so why not? And give the video a like if you liked it. And if you want some private lessons, I am open for online tutorials from July 2024. You can contact me on theviolincoach@gmail.com. Sawadee ka from Thailand.